What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, April 1st, 2021. Thank goodness it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. That's it. I get these mixed up. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. It's also April Fool's Day, but we're not going to do any April Fool's stuff on this show because how could we possibly compete with the fools in Washington, D.C. How I see the situation here. And as usual, we're going to do news for an hour. Then we're going to open up the phone lines and get your comments in. And there's probably going to be a lot of phone calls today because the news, unfortunately, is very, very troubling. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. And let's get right on into it. I'm going to start with some of the international news because there is a situation brewing over in Ukraine which could erupt into a major war literally at any moment. And so I've got a whole bunch of articles here that taken collectively paint a very, very negative picture about what's going on here. This is coming from Reuters News. Kremlin says it fears Ukraine could restart conflict in war-torn East. Now, what seems to be going on here is it looks like Kiev is getting ready to go back into the Donbass and start up war there again. We talked about that earlier in the week, and it's already starting to escalate. The tensions are sky high. The Kremlin said yesterday it was concerned by mounting tensions in war-torn eastern Ukraine, and it feared Kiev's government forces could do something to restart a conflict with the pro-Russian separatists. Now, the comments came a day after Ukraine's commander-in-chief accused Russia of a military buildup near their shared border and said that the pro-Moscow separatists were systematically violating a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. So we've got Kiev and Moscow blaming each other. And as is always the case when these wars get started, each side tries to make it look like it's the other side's fault that these things got going here. Kiev is inviting NATO to hold joint military drills in response to Russia's moving troops and weapons near the Ukrainian border. So they're getting NATO already involved over there. Russia is saying any attempt to start a new war in Donbass could destroy all of Ukraine. This is coming out of TASS, and it's quoting Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, saying that any attempts to start a new military conflict in Ukraine's war-torn east could end up destroying Ukraine. Meanwhile, Zelensky is out there saying that Russia is trying to exert pressure on Ukraine by building up the troops along the border. And in a Facebook post, Zelensky noted that he would highlight 2 points on the issue of war and peace. First of all, it's about Donbass. Indeed, escalation has been observed since year's start. 20 dead and 57 wounded in the first few months of 2021 alone. This is the price of war and defending our independence, sovereignty, and the territorial integrity of our Ukraine. So tensions are skyrocketing because of those military forces Russia is massing on their side of the border. And Russia is basically saying that, look, what we do inside our borders with our military is nobody's business but our own. But the war of words is already well underway. Meanwhile, and this is what really has me worried, the United States has declared its unwavering support for Ukraine, with Russia flooding Crimea with trains full of tanks amid escalating tensions. And again, it looks like both Donbass and Crimea may get caught up in what is about to happen. Story coming on out of, hang on just a second, I have to get larger type on this thing, union.info. Russian forces may try to advance deeper into Ukraine. This is coming from Ukraine's military intelligence. And like I said, this may well be propaganda to try and make it look like the coming conflagration is somehow Russia's fault. And we have certainly seen within our own government and corporate media all the Russia bashing going on. Russia's bad, all the bad things that happen. It's all Putin's fault here. Lose a sock in the dryer, it's Putin. Wax the yellow buildup in the corners of your kitchen floor, it's got to be Vladimir Putin, so forth and so on. Meanwhile, continuing the idea of cranking up the propaganda, story coming out of the New York Post, the U.S. is slamming human rights abuses by Russian proxies in Ukraine. The U.S. Department of State on March 30th, 2 days ago, released a country report condemning large-scale human rights violations in Russia. And so the war of words is definitely going on. Story coming on out of Patriot Rising. As Russian tanks move toward Ukraine, the globe braces for the possibility that World War III could soon erupt, and that is something that I think, even without this article, reading the others, that has to be a possibility that everybody is thinking of right now. And we know that the U.S. government has been gearing up for a major global conflict. They've been doing it ever since the 1990s, and the Project for the New American Century, and they may just say now's a good time. And it would also take the American people's mind off all the lies about the COVID virus and the masks and the social distancing, and a good war is certainly going to take the public's mind off the failing economy, which is going to get worse during wartime. Now, story coming on out of Zero Hedge. Kremlin responds to anger over Ukraine border buildup, saying our internal troop movements are not your concern. But again, they are piling up on the Russian side of the shared border. Now, a top U.S. military officer is calling Russia and Ukraine over the concerns about the troop buildup. And Joint Chief of Staff Chairman General Mark Milley spoke by phone with Ukraine Chief of General Staff Lieutenant General Ruslan Komchak about the security developments. And he also spoke with Russia's top officer, Chief of the General Staff General Valery Gerasimov, and the two traded their views. This looks really, really serious, and, good time to launch a major war would be this weekend, when everybody, certainly in the United States, is distracted by, Passover and by Easter rabbits and all the rest of it. Now, in Russia and much of Europe, Easter isn't celebrated until May 2nd, but this is not going to hold together until May 2nd. In other developments in the warmongering, warships and submarines are entering the area where the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is under construction, and the operator there is saying they are obstructing the work. The pipeline is nearing completion, and the U.S. sanctions against the contractors have failed to stop the construction, and so now we're seeing all these warships and submarines sort of gathering around and rattling their torpedoes, as it were. Now, Biden is ordering the Pentagon to remove forces out of the Persian Gulf region, according to reports cited by Sputnik News. And they've moved 3 Patriot systems out of the region, including one that was located in Saudi Arabia. My guess would be they're planning on quickly redeploying them into the Ukraine region. Okay. All right. Getting into local political news here, and by local I mean Washington, D.C. Hunter Biden has a new book out that is just a continuation of the Trump bashing. He uses the book to try and polish his image. He denies the Ukraine bribery scandal. The book is titled Beautiful Things. It's scheduled to be released on April 6th, and you can count on me not to buy a particular copy. And what's really interesting, we're looking at a guy who was exposed by his own laptop as being, well, for lack of a better word, a pervert. And here he has the temerity in this book to describe Donald Trump as a vile human being. Okay, now Jill Biden spoke to farm workers in Delano, California, with Governor Newsom at her side Wednesday and botched a slogan, a Spanish slogan, during a celebration honoring the memory of Cesar Chavez. And apparently, the slogan she was supposed to say was "Si se puede." And it's awkward, and she's being trashed on social media. Social media is trying to take all those comments down. Getting on over to Derek Chauvin, Ann Coulter has an article out describing him as a human sacrifice. And she says, in modern America, we are offering up white men as human sacrifices to the PC gods. And among our benefactions, Jake Gardner, Carl Rittenhouse, Darren Wilson, the Duke lacrosse players, University of Virginia fraternity members, Stacey Kuhn and Mark Furman. And the rest of the people are just keeping their heads down and praying that they will not be next. It's like the witch hunts. The accusation alone is enough to condemn you. Another article, this one is coming out of UNS.com. Officer Chauvin's show trial will bring the end of law and order. And they're drawing parallels between this current trial of Chauvin and the old Soviet show trials that they put out for political reasons. And yeah, there are definitely similarities. This whole George Floyd situation, if it did not start out as a government psyop, it has certainly been turned into one. Another story here, this one coming out of Mass Private. NextGov has reported that the FCC wants to have the ability to interrupt streaming platforms like YouTube, Hulu, Netflix, Spotify, and Pandora in order to broadcast government safety alerts. In other words, propaganda. You're watching, Mary Poppins, and just when Dick Van Dyke is getting really good, they come on in and say, yes, we've got something to tell you that you will believe. It's like the old view screen system in 1984. There was a school in Chicago, and it was basically named for a former president, and there was a call to rename the school after Barack Obama because the former president didn't meet the PC woke standards of behavior, at least in this age, but there's been a surprising pushback. Activists are protesting renaming the Chicago school after Barack Obama, saying that Obama was just another oppressor. But then, aren't they all? Another story coming on out in Patriot Rising. And they're saying the states must resist the federal takeover of elections. And they're talking about how House Resolution 1 institutionalizes election theft. And some may wonder why such theft needs to be institutionalized, because the Democrats are really, really good at stealing elections, and they don't really need the new law. Now, the good news is apparently Democratic support for House Resolution 1 is beginning to splinter. And so we'll see what happens with that one. All right, we're going to talk about COVID-19. It's still out there being wagged at us as hard as they can. Over at Investment Watch blog, they're saying the new normal is that a COVID pass equals your personal freedom. And it is a very, very coercive thing. It's a violation of the Nuremberg Code and U.S. law to force people to undergo experimental medical treatments without informed consent. And that's what these vaccines are. They're experimental treatments. They are not FDA approved. They are being distributed and used under an emergency authorization only. Now, yesterday, we reported on how the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was finally starting to show adverse reactions. There was one teacher who died 24 hours after getting the shot. Another gentleman over in Virginia, his skin turned red and started peeling. It was just an ugly situation. And now shipments of Johnson & Johnson vaccine have been halted because there's been a manufacturing error that ruined 15 million doses. It had the wrong ingredients in it. And they're saying this does not affect doses of the vaccine that have already been distributed, but it is a reminder that the pipeline, if you will, for the production of vaccines is far from perfect. Over in Canada, Pastor James Coates, who pastors the Grace Life Church in the Edmonton area, has been arrested multiple times for holding church services. And he has finally been freed. And he said, freedom is precious. And so he's going to go back to doing what he was doing. So I'm glad they let him out of prison there, because that was a little ridiculous. Over in France, French schools will close for at least 3 more weeks as part of a new national restriction to fight rising COVID cases, according to President Emmanuel Macron. Okay. This is kind of interesting, getting into taxes, if you will. Pete Buttigieg wants to tax Americans for every mile they drive. They are looking for any way they can take more money from you for Joe Biden's $2.5 trillion infrastructure investment plan, which I understand only 25% of that $2.5 trillion is actually going for infrastructure. And like the stimulus, COVID stimulus bill, most of the money is going to favored pork barrel projects. Okay. Looking back on the conflict in Iraq, this story coming out of Patriot Rising is saying, this is nationalinterest.org had this article saying that our lack of spectacular success in Iraq has exposed huge flaws in American strategic thinking. And that is something that should be of worry to people as it looks like we're heading into a major new war. And finally, this story came on out, and it's from UNS.com. And new evidence has surfaced showing that the top al-Qaeda operative who aided the 9/11 hijackers was working for the Central Intelligence Agency, and there is your smoking gun. And 2 weeks ago, Major General Abdul Qadir al-Shami, the deputy security chief of the Houthi rebel government in Yemen, unearthed a recording between ex-CIA Director George Tenet and former Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh regarding the U.S.-born al-Qaeda operative Anwar al-Awlaki. We've heard that name before, and apparently he was a CIA asset, and there is your smoking gun that the entire 9/11 was a setup to anger American people into supporting a new century of war, like a new Pearl Harbor angered Americans into supporting World War II. Getting into immigration here, estimates show the U.S. is on track to encounter 2 million migrants on the southern border in 2021. This is according to government estimates regarding the number of migrants expected to cross into the U.S. this year. 2 million. And Joe Biden's border crisis is only just beginning. And oh my goodness, we're not supposed to use the word crisis, according to the Associated Press, because they have issued a dictum to their journalists, their correspondents, and their prostitutes not to use the word crisis to describe what's going on down in the southern border. They're still trying to polish up Joe Biden's image here. Getting into woke culture, politically correct culture here. There's a story from Information Liberation talking about how trans rights are human rights, and the Biden regime is embracing the transgender ideology. One of the things they're doing is that if you are in the military and you wish to change your gender, the taxpayers will pay for it. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and a friendly reminder that Republic Broadcasting Network is holding out their little tin cup with the pencils in it, and we need you to stop by and drop a little something off so that we can continue doing the work that we're doing, which is to keep the American people informed and hopefully stop World War III, which is a big reason I've been doing this for as long as I've been doing this. So a reminder, the postal address where you can send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a debit or credit card donation is 800-724-2719, extension 3. And if you mail in a donation of $100, you can get one of the spiffy official RBN t-shirts and the bragging rights to go with it, or you can get an RBN coffee mug. And if you send in $115 or more, you get both. Please include your t-shirt size and a return mailing address. And don't forget, the Frontside Firearms deal is still going on as well. Getting on back to the news here, on Wednesday, a judge basically decided against prison time for a transgender former neo-Nazi. And when I read that headline, the first thing that came on up is this guy has to be really messed up in the head. So anyway, the judge said that because of the person's difficult past, he was not going to send him, her, it to prison. So we'll see what happens there. The other day, we came on out with this comment made by CNN saying that there is no consensus opinion on how to tell a person's gender at birth. And we all laughed at that. And Senator John Kennedy, commented on it, saying gender identity is known at birth because a boy has a penis and a girl has a vagina. And it is that simple. Somebody sent me a image the other day that said God created man and woman, and the Democrats created all those other genders out there, which is definitely true. And we have another story where, let's see. Oh, thunder snow hit Denver. It made Denver the snowiest March in recorded history. Gosh darn, that human-caused global warming. They had all that snow out there in Denver. And we actually went down below freezing here in Indiana last night, this part of Indiana, and they're predicting it's going to get even colder. If there were to be any precipitation in the air, we could actually get snow tonight, and I'm certainly going to be looking out for that. Getting into the science news that everybody wants to hear more and more of, researchers have detected ultra-low radio frequencies being emitted from what they described as a jellyfish-shaped object in a distant galaxy cluster. Well, if they have honed up the technology to listen to ultra-low radio frequencies, dial them down a little bit lower and start scanning between, shall we say, 100 and 400 hertz, because I think we're going to find extraterrestrial civilizations a lot more quickly by listening for the emanations from their power distribution systems rather than from their deliberate sending of radio signals out into space. Because power basically, grows with the civilization. Radio emanations peak and then decline. And that is certainly true here on planet Earth as more and more broadcasts go to cable and closed systems, and there's less and less high-powered radio being put on out there. Okay, so they're out there listening to that stuff as well. We've been talking about Governor Kristi Noem. She vetoed the transgender bill, and issued 2 executive orders to protect athletes. The bill is now on its way back to her desk. Arkansas is banning doctors from giving puberty blockers and hormone treatments to trans children under the age of 18. I totally agree with this. Look, once you're an adult, once you've grown up and you really think that having your pee-pee whacked off is going to make all your life's problems go away, go ahead. You know, I have no problem with that. The real problem is, and this is being hidden by the transgender community, a lot of people who go through the hormones and the surgery end up regretting it, because they discover that going through the hormones and the surgery didn't really fix the underlying problems in their life at all. In fact, it just made things worse. But the transgenders don't want you to think about that. They're out there trying to convince everybody, including children, that, you know, if you get the surgery and you get the hormones, you know, life is going to be beautiful and people are going to love you and you won't have any more bad breath or anything like that. All right, we got to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about, well, all kinds of wokeness stuff here. And Planned Parenthood, otherwise known as Eugenics, Inc., is getting into the transgender business. And they see this as a new market, reaching out to young people who identify as transgender and offering them hormone therapy. And, you know, this is part of a growing trend. You know, this is young adults who consider themselves transgender or gender non-conforming. That's apparently the new thing here. They're seeking hormones to modify their bodies, maybe not to the extent that they change genders, but for example, for a girl to have less fat and more muscle and look a little bit more masculine. And Planned Parenthood's 2019-2020 annual report shows the extent of the new venture. 200 centers in 31 states now welcome patients who design transgender hormone therapy. You know, anything for a buck. And over at the, let's see, a U.S. Court of Appeals, the Sixth Circuit Court, ruled Friday that a Catholic professor, Shawnee State University, rather Dr. Nicholas Merriweather, had his First Amendment rights violated by Shawnee State University. Now, he's been at the university for 25 years, and he refused to refer to a male student as a female. And the university cracked down on him really hard, and he countersued. And the court said, yeah, if the person sitting in front of him looks like a male and talks like a male and smells like a male, then it's probably a male. We apply common sense and the duct test there. A Virginia school is under fire after video footage showed a teacher berating a student for refusing to acknowledge racial differences. I remember a time not that long ago when we were being taught to ignore racial differences. But this is coming out of critical race theory, where they're emphasizing race and demonizing whites all in the same place. Anyway, this teacher's critical race theory sermon is not the only woke scandal to hit the district. Now, this school is located on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. The Loudoun County Public School District is one of the wealthiest in the nation, with the average household there pulling in $136,000 per year. It also emerged lately as a hotbed of critical race theory, which puts race at the center of every human interaction, views the U.S. as structurally racist, and maintains that white supremacy and white privilege permeate every single institution in this country, including, apparently, sheet music now is considered white supremacy. All right. GoFundMe has removed a group of Loudoun County, Virginia parents who are against critical race theory from the fundraising website, caving into left-wing demands from teachers and school board members in a district that is rapidly becoming ground zero in the fight against the use of the radical racist curriculum. And that's exactly what it is. It is racist. It may be racist in reverse, but it's still racism. So anyway, over in Great Britain, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, said, we can't erase the past. We have to learn from it. And this is a rare break with protocol because the Archbishop of Canterbury normally doesn't get political. But he also described cancel culture as a huge threat to the future of the institution. And that's been one of my arguments against tearing down all these statues and monuments and trying to erase history. If you don't understand history and how the big mistakes were made, you're going to make those same big mistakes all over again. And like I said at the top of the show, keep your eye on Ukraine because that looks like it's about to blow. Getting into gun rights now. This is coming out of UNS.com. Gun control was already a Biden administration priority. He campaigned on it, and it was a priority before the recent shootings in Georgia, Colorado, and Virginia, and I understand they had another one out in Los Angeles. And the House of Representatives has passed 2 gun control bills weeks before the shootings. Now, one of the bills expands background checks to include private sales, including those made at gun shows. You know, the only background check that I would actually support is if the person buying a gun is on prescription antidepressant medication, because we know that people who are on that antidepressant medication, they're not themselves. They are really not themselves. They have been chemically transformed into something else. And we know that those antidepressant pills in many cases basically interfere with you know, impulse control, where people will get an impulse and they'll just act on it. In fact, one of my favorite stories from ssristories.org is this kid tried to commit suicide, was on these pills, tried to commit suicide. They got to him in time, and after it was all over, they said, why'd you do it? And he said, I don't know. It just popped into my head, and I couldn't help myself. Now, we know, certainly in Columbine, that those shooters were on or withdrawing from these prescription antidepressants. Ever since then, when there's a mass shooting, requests to find out if they're on these medications are denied because the person has rights to privacy, even if they died during the mass shooting. And I think that is a crime against America. Meanwhile, Rahm Emanuel is out there saying it's time to strip gun owners of due process rights. And this is lining up with that recent Supreme Court case, which is arguing whether police can simply walk into your home and confiscate your guns without a warrant. So they're really afraid of you is what this comes down to. You're really, really afraid of it. And, oh, here's another article on the same subject. This is from Global Research. Guns and drugs don't mix. Psychiatric medications and violent behavior. And the establishment media is ignoring all of the scientific evidence linking these medications and violent behavior because psychiatry is the religion of the corporate media. And so they're not going to mention the dangers of psychiatrically prescribed drugs. Actually, they don't mention the dangers of any drugs because they're dependent on that pharmaceutical advertising money to keep them afloat. Okay. Over in West Virginia, yay, West Virginia, their House passed a bill to ban enforcement of federal gun control laws in the state, past, present, and future. And this happened basically almost a week ago. Almost a week ago. Now, what is all this gun grabbing doing for the American people? Well, they're signing up for the NRA. And memberships are surging as Americans across the country reject the Democrats' efforts to restrict the Second Amendment via gun control and now more increasingly ammo control. As you're probably already aware, there's a huge shortage. Costs have gone way, way up. A lot of that is taxation. Again, looking at all of these stories together, it is clear this government is very much afraid of you, the American people, because you know the last election election was stolen. You know that because the last election was stolen, this government is illegitimate. And the fraudulent government wants to hang on to power, and they are very concerned that the original intent of the Second Amendment was to give the people the means to throw off abusive, dishonest, illegitimate government, and we are unfortunately, sadly, tragically nearing that point. Getting into some computer news right now, AT&T is lobbying against nationwide fiber. It says 10 megabits per second uploads are good enough for you people, your users over there. And they're lobbying against proposals to subsidize fiber to the home deployment across the U.S. Now, a lot of other countries have fiber to the home. Japan does. They're at gigabit speeds to the homes. And, you know, with the streaming services hogging most of the bandwidth, there's not really a lot left over for other people to do what it is that they want to do. But I think what's going on here is AT&T invested a lot of money in their metal cables. They don't want to write that off yet. They don't want fiber to come along because then they're going to take a loss on what they've already built. Now, we've been talking about Boston Dynamics. We all saw that wonderful movie where they had a bunch of their robots dancing to the song Do You Love Me? And it was fun to watch, and we know that's not why they're building the robots, but it still was fun. And frankly, it would be, as far as I can tell from outside, would be a fun company to work for. One of the robots that was featured toward the end of that video has now been identified. It's called the Stretch. And it is designed and built for just one specific warehouse job, moving boxes around. It actually balances itself on two wheels. It's got a long arm with a whole array of suction cups at the top where it can basically grab a box and move it. And I saw a video of it doing that, not dancing, and it looked really, really good. Now, we had a caller into the show the other day. We were talking about the pros and cons of replacing humans with robots, and we both seem to agree that on very, very repetitive, physically difficult, unpleasant jobs, robots were definitely an ideal way to go, but for certain other jobs, definitely want a human being on the other side of the transactions. Now, we're all hearing about the evolution of artificial intelligence, and there's a story that came on out of Wired.com about how the basic foundations of artificial intelligence are riddled with errors. And the reason for that is machine vision systems are being trained by letting them look at images. So far, so good. But very often those images have wrong labels on them. They're incorrect. And because of that, the AIs are picking up bad information about the images they're looking at. This could mean bad decisions by self-driving cars and worse, medical algorithms. And I think I've already seen evidence of this because one of the social media websites that I do use, every once in a while they put up a string of pictures and say, you know, is this you, is this you, is this you? And most of them are not even close. So, a little way to go on that one. Yeah, old computer saying, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If they're training the AIs with bad data, they're going to get bad conclusions coming out of the AI. Interesting little story. This is coming out of Gizmodo. And it's talking about a new neurological condition affecting bears. And the symptoms are rather interesting because it makes the bears completely unafraid of humans. And it makes the bears friendly. They'll just come up to you and, you know, nuzzle you and want to get into your picnic basket. And, you know, but they're not really a danger. Unfortunately, according to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, eventually this brain condition does kill those bears, and that is really a bad thing. Up on the planet Mars, the Perseverance rover has now deployed the Ingenuity helicopter. NASA was originally planning to give it its first flight on the 8th. Now they're saying that will not happen until after the 11th. Okay, we're going to go ahead and open up the phone lines a little bit early because I think people are probably going to want to talk about what's going on in Ukraine. Area code 512-248-8252, and so the phone lines are open now. Getting on to other news here. There's a story that is coming on out of Patriot Rising on how proof has surfaced that the FBI launched a bogus operation against Trump's 2016 campaign using a longtime deep state asset. And they find out basically that Obama and the deep state were so terrified of Trump and his promises to actually drain the swamp, they went all out to defeat him in one of the most outrageous scandals in the history of our country. And of course, they took him out of office with the crookedest election in U.S. history. Okay. Democrats are now out there seeking a recurring stimulus check or universal basic income, meaning they're pushing toward communism, socialism, whatever you want to call it. And another article, this one is coming out of Patriot Rising again, listing all the ways that the Democrats For the People Act, and it's not for the people, it's for the Democrats, and it makes it impossible for GOP candidates to win future elections. And this gets back to the article we were mentioning before about how they're trying to institutionalize vote theft and how really good they are. We've mentioned this before, but it's worth mentioning again. If you question the World Health Organization narrative on COVID-19, if you have doubts about the use of vaccines, you can be declared a delusional conspiracy theorist. If you doubt that global warming is caused by carbon dioxide and that implementing the Paris Climate Accords may cause more damage to humanity than climate change ever could, then you must be a conspiracy theorist. We should have gotten Jeff Foxworthy to be talking this one. Ultimately, though, conspiracy theorizing will get you labeled as a domestic terrorist. And I think that is ridiculous. I mean, they completely, mutilated the definition of the word terrorist. They're using it for its negative connotation and shock value, but they're using it on people who merely have a different opinion about what's going on in the country, and we do have a right to have a different opinion guaranteed to us by the First Amendment. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials. The phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252. Call on in, and let's talk about what's going on in the world. Welcome back to our show here, and I just got an email correcting me on a comment I made before. Apparently in Europe, Easter is celebrated the same day that it is celebrated here in the United States, meaning this coming Sunday. And so we're going to go to the phones now to Dan in Texas. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Did I turn that? No, I didn't.
You're cutting in and out.
And I have a little. Yeah, I'm trying to turn my speakerphone off, and I'm blind and sometimes have trouble finding the button.
Okay.
Anyway, this is sarcastic April Fool's question.
Yeah.
This business going on over in the Ukraine. I want to know if we've seen any articles about the soldiers social distancing and wearing masks, because if they haven't heard, if they don't, they're going to kill us all.
Yeah. Well, with both sides, U.S. and Russia, having nuclear weapons right now, I'm not sweating the mask and social distancing.
I agree. Sorry, Mike, it's April Fool's.
I know it's April Fool, but like I said, we can't compete with the fools in Washington, D.C., so why should we even try?
And I wholly agree with that as well.
All right.
All right. Have a great Easter, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. The phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252. Getting on back to some other news here. We already talked about Associated Press. James O'Keefe and Project Veritas have another expose video from a whistleblower, this one on the Border Patrol, about the conditions down there, and it's very, very ugly, and I'm not surprised that the Biden-Harris administration is trying to lock that down to the point where Associated Press is telling their journalists not to bother using the word crisis when they describe what's going on down there. All righty. Sir Ron Brearley, rented lips here, he's a corporate raider known as the Master. He's worth about $200 million, and he has pled guilty to 3 counts of possessing child abuse material. Now, he's 83 years old. He's accused of having 207,000 images and videos of children as young as 2. And he was arrested in December of 2019 after a tip-off to police, and he could actually lose his knighthood over this, and I think that would definitely be the very, very least that should happen to him. It's just vile here. This story really bothered me. I didn't put it in the original talking points, but it's basically a German Shepherd. We got to take a break for station identification. The phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252, and we will be right back. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252, and I'm really interested in people's reactions to what is going on in Ukraine, because I have to tell you, the hairs are up on the back of my neck, and it does feel like a major, major confrontation is going to happen there, and that we could be looking at the beginning of a true global war. Getting on back to the news while we're waiting for some phone calls, a story coming out of the Gateway Pundit. New Mexico State University professor and attorney David K. Clements was the final presenter at Regent University's Election Integrity Conference back on the 23rd, and he addressed the legal questions and issues surrounding the 2020 presidential election. And during his presentation, he asked a cogent question: where was the FBI? Where were the courts? Where was the legislature? And I pointed out the other day, it's interesting, we're seeing these state legislatures move toward trying to clean up the election system, but they weren't really there to try and deal with the obvious fraud as it was happening last November. They weren't backing the President of the United States. And again, Trump was a tremendous disappointment as far as I'm concerned. But if we don't have honest, verifiable elections, then we, the people, have been totally disenfranchised from the government. Another way of putting that is the government has become illegitimate. It is an occupying power. And we've seen around the world how populations under the control of an occupying power don't react to it very, very well at all. Okay. Down in Cancun, they were having a gender reveal party, which ended in a plane crash, diving into the ocean. Okay. Americans are still afraid to go to live sporting events, even if literally everyone has been vaccinated or tested negative. Okay, we've got another caller on the line. Mark in North Carolina. Hello, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Let me just lower this thing a little bit. Yeah, you were talking about Ukraine, and I think I mentioned something about it yesterday. I don't think it's going to come to an actual war between the U.S. and Russia. Why? Not because of our civilian leadership, but I think the Pentagon knows the generals and the top colonels and stuff. They know they're smart enough to realize this would be a lose-lose situation for the United States.
Mm-hmm.
If it stays conventional, we get our butts kicked, and of course, if it goes nuclear, that could be the end of the planet as we know it. And you won't have to worry about social distancing or anything else like that. You know, masks, like you said, masks. You won't worry about vaccines. It'll be all over if that happens. So I think people in the Pentagon are going to be wise enough to know not to get involved. They may try to make Russia look bad. You know, maybe get more sanctions on them, which would be really nothing to Russia right now. They're in very good economic shape. They've got a great trading partnership with China,
Mm-hmm.
Iran, I believe India, and some other countries. And I really don't. So I think that's basically it, because I don't really think they think we could defeat Russia in a land war in that part of the world. I mean, this is all
Well,
territory.
just to play
Part of their
devil's
country.
just to play devil's advocate with you, I think much of the leadership in the Pentagon are very heavily economically linked with the defense contractors. Certainly, they're looking forward to very cushy, well-paying jobs after they finish their 20 in the military, and they may not be concerned who wins or loses a conventional war as long as it grinds up those weapons and justifies more spending on more weapons to replace them. And they may be deluding themselves that they can avoid a nuclear conflict. I mean, look, we didn't do well in Afghanistan, but it still made a lot of money for the defense contractors. We didn't do very well in Iraq. They're trying to ask us to leave, but the military contractors did very well. And it's Eisenhower warned us, the military-industrial complex has a tremendous amount of influence over the United States government. And if they say we're not making enough money, let's start a war. I mean, we've been hearing that again, going back to the Project for the New American Century.
Yeah, but Mike, we're not talking about getting to, being bogged down in a guerrilla war like we were in Vietnam or then again in Iraq, Afghanistan, and all that. We're talking about taking on a major power that would probably not only swallow up the whole Ukraine. And by the way, if you notice in Georgia, we didn't get involved in Georgia in 2008 when Russia wasn't even anywhere near as powerful as they are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they were starting to get, their strength back then. And, you're talking about a major defeat. Even talking about the possibility of NATO countries being overrun, especially in Eastern Europe. This would not look good for these guys at the Pentagon, even if they had their designs on getting jobs once they got out, And I just don't think I don't think they're that great. They don't want to go down in history as being losers, of getting the ignominious defeats in the United States.
Didn't stop us in Vietnam. We went down as losers there, and we certainly haven't won in Afghanistan or Iraq. And I think that the situation here is, again, it's being driven by money for the military-industrial complex. And what's really going to be the telling signal is if Ukraine just goes into the Donbass, then it's an internal issue, and you'll be right, it's not going to escalate from there. But if Ukraine goes into Crimea, then that is an affront that the Russian republics are going to have to respond to. And with all this talk about the U.S. unwaveringly supporting Ukraine, to me that looks like the open door of starting World War III and making it look like Russia's to blame.
Oh, I think even if they start in the Donbass, Russia's going to get involved this time. They're not going to let the western part of Ukraine get away with crimes against the Russian people. Putin's under too much pressure in his own country for that. They will respond, and they'll respond, with quite a bit of force, because that's their. It's just like, let's say in Mexico. Well, let's say Texas does secede from the United States, and Russia goes and arms the Texans, okay, or China arms the Texans. What do you think we would do? All right? No, they're not going to let this. Ukraine has been traditionally, the whole Ukraine has traditionally been part of Russia, especially the eastern part.
Well, that was the reason for the coup d'état in Kiev a few years back, is because they were, moving toward the Russian republics rather than toward the EU.
You're right. But this time, I think they're, and especially as disorganized this country is right now, all the problems we've got going on right now, the purge going on in the military right now, looking for Trump supporters. You can't have the military is not, is demoralized. There's not. I'm telling you, I would think the generals are smarter than that. I know they're not the smartest people in the world. I know there's some, but especially the Joint Chiefs, they usually get up there by having a head up, somebody's behind. But the thing is, they don't want to go down. I think they do know enough about military strategy, and they do have enough people telling them, don't do it. Whatever you do, don't do it. Do not get involved in a land war with Russia. It's a lose-lose situation, and it could, of course, result in the end of the planet, as we know it, too.
Yes.
That's the most extreme result. But even if just losing a conventional war, we're not. Vietnam was still a guerrilla war, but if you're talking about taking on another power, we haven't really done that since, I don't know, World War II.
Correct.
Okay, we really haven't done it since World War II. It's as if we would have been defeated by Germany. Okay, I'm not saying the Russians are Germany. They're not. They're not. They're not. I consider Russia as a very decent country, a very Christian country today.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, they probably have more freedom than we do at this point in time.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So, but the thing is, this would look very bad, and like I said, this could result in hundreds of thousands of troops being killed, and even more. I mean, this, we're not talking, like I said, this is not Iraq, this is not Afghanistan, this is not Vietnam, there's not any of that stuff. It's not even Korea. This is, you're talking about, one of the major superpowers, one of the major three superpowers in the world today. And there's also the possibility China could get involved.
Uh-huh.
And so, I really don't think that I don't think they're that crazy. And the rest
well, I would hope that, but then I think war itself is a pretty crazy thing to begin with. And a few months ago, we ran a story about how the U.S. Army's doctrine was being shifted from police actions in these small backwater countries into dealing with a great power conflict. And so it looks like they were getting ready to do this.
Well, all I can say is let's pray that doesn't happen.
I don't want it to happen. I hope it won't happen, but I'm seeing so many things being reported in so many areas, and I'm seeing so much tough talk. And we know that this government has a bad habit of every time they get into a terrible economic situation, they get into a world war to get out of it. Crash of 1907, World War I, crash of 1929, World War II, crash of 2008, and boy, are those sabers being rattled right now.
I mean, Mike, you would have to have a draft anyway.
Yes.
If it goes anywhere past like a week, you would have to have it, and you'd have to have a quick draft. Now, can you imagine all the turmoil going on in this country? If you want to unite the right and the left, okay, real quickly, just have a draft and see what happens. Just see what happens.
Well,
okay?
the Pentagon may be making the same strategic mistake that Nazi Germany did toward the end of World War II, where they de-emphasized ground troops in favor of the high-tech wonder weapons. And we've been hearing, about the new drones and hypersonic missiles, and the Pentagon may be thinking about fighting this next war more with the robotic weapons than with real human beings.
Yeah,
now, of course, that's the mistake they made in Vietnam. They thought they could win that war from the air, and they really didn't need that many boots on the ground.
Yeah, but the Russians have the same kind of weapons. If anything,
yes, they do.
Are better than ours right now.
Yes, they do.
Where would that go? I mean, if you have unfortunately, AI is a thing of the future. I wish it wasn't, but just saw a movie last night on Prime about a robot dog that got away with, I think it was AIQ, something like that.
Yeah.
It was kind of cute, but it showed you what these, the way they're trying to make robots seem like sympathetic characters. You know what I mean? Like you should feel for these robots. I don't feel for a robot. I feel a robot is a machine, and a dangerous machine at that. Even if you make it look like a dog or make it look like a human being. But, that's the way things are. But you're probably right. A war between the U.S. and Russia would at least involve a lot of robot-like, drones and stuff. But you still have plenty of, because they don't have that many yet, and they don't have that many yet. So it would still be ground troops. And the ground troops, by the way, if it stayed in that area, would be under the enormous, destruction by these modern weapons. Even if it didn't turn nuclear. I mean, these are devastating weapons that both of us sides have.
Yes.
So you're talking about total disaster. That's why I believe something may happen with the Ukraine now, because I think they're being misled to the thing that the United States will be involved. But I think it's just going to be Russia will probably take over the entire eastern Ukraine, probably leave Kiev alone if Kiev doesn't push too far. And I think that's where it's going to end. But, I can't guarantee that. Who am I? I'm nobody. I got a high school diploma.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I do like to study history, and I like, and I like to study current events, military affairs. I was in the military and all that, but I'm far from an expert. It's just, from what I gather, I don't think we're yet. I think the politicians in this country, many of them are on psych drugs. You got a demented old fool there in the White House that can barely make it up a flight of stairs. Okay, but you do, and his thinking process is, very dubious.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that the top people at the Pentagon are smart enough not to do something like that. But we'll see what happens. I just pray that for the best.
Well, I certainly hope for the best either, but I got to tell you, my instincts are telling me that this could easily go major. Anyway, Mark, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. We have phone lines open, area code 512-248-8252. Doesn't have to be about Ukraine, but that's obviously where the focus is going to be right now. And we're going to go to Bruce in Texas. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, yes, good afternoon, Mike. You mentioned the Project for New American Century.
Yes.
Did you know that Victoria Nuland's husband was the co-founder of PNAC?
Who?
Victoria Nuland, the person who was in the Obama administration at the State Department, is now there again.
Yes.
And who, So
she's got an ugly history of, interfering with other countries' governments.
Yes, she does. Yes, that was a hallmark of the Obama administration, and we come full circle again. It's Obama's third term. And as far as military officers not following orders from their first caller was in Michael, North Carolina, I find that totally implausible.
Yes.
Yes. This guy lives in a fantasy land. I hate to be one of the bashers now, but come on, quit apologizing for the Biden administration. Quit thinking that, I believe in National Socialism, but not the way it was in the 1930s. If you look at history, if you open up your books and you actually get past high school history, you'll realize that's exactly what National Socialist Germany did.
Yes.
They kicked out the bankers and they rejuvenated their economy. And it wasn't run by the corporatists. The corporatists were under the heel of the government. And if you didn't do what they wanted, you didn't get the contracts, period. And anyhow, I've got dog issues. I'm sure there's other callers, but you get my point here, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, so I'm sorry. I'll let you go now. Appreciate it.
All right, not a problem here. Actually, we're not getting a lot of callers today, and I figure it's probably as we get close. I mean, tomorrow's Good Friday, and people are probably out doing their Easter shopping and getting their baskets ready for the kiddies and whatnot. So again, the phone lines are open. Area code 512-248-8252 does not have to be about Ukraine, but I am interested in hearing what your view of the current situation is. Meanwhile, getting on back to COVID news, Delta Airlines has become the first major airline, the final major airline to begin selling the middle seat on airplanes. And it's going to begin selling the middle seats on May 1st, meaning that on that date, every major airline in the United States will once again have middle seats in the entire plane. This is since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. Down in Charlottesville, State Supreme Court Justice Bernard Goodwin has said that, as a matter of fact, these Confederate statues can be removed, and both statues were erected long before the passage of a law regulating the disturbance of or interference with war memorials or monuments. And so they're, again, erasing our history down there. Over in Texas, their Attorney General Ken Paxton is saying that Texans are paying an estimated $855 million per year to cover the cost of illegal immigration. And he's saying Texas cannot continue to foot the bill for those who are skirting the law. And he's absolutely right. Biden's border policies are impoverishing the American border states. And it's very unfair that the taxpayers in those states are paying more money in taxes and getting less services back from their state governments because the states are being forced to deal with the illegal immigrants coming over the border. Okay, we got to take another break for commercials here. Phone lines are open, area code 512-248-8252, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here, and we are seeing reports from foreign news sources that the Ukrainian Army Chief of Staff has openly announced the start of the campaign in Donbass. So it looks like it's definitely on. We're going to go back to the phones now to Tom in Florida. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, yeah, Michael, good day to you.
Good day.
What's on my mind right now, Mike, is, Ukraine's one thing, but let's talk about what's really going on here. And I have to bring this up, Mike. The governor today in Montana, have you heard of what he's doing?
Doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, well, the governor here in the state of Florida is going to go on board with him. I believe the governor maybe in Texas, maybe, I don't know about Abby, maybe one of your callers will call in. Well, the governor today just signed an executive order in the state of Montana. We will not have sanctuary cities. Anybody who promotes sanctuary cities will be arrested.
Good.
Actually, he's getting real hard-nosed.
Good.
Yes, and it's finally, Ron DeSantis is doing the same thing, Mike. I guess they're listening to your show with me, because now a lot of other governors are falling in place. This should never have been tolerated, never should have been allowed. Like I said, Mike, people, white trash, should have been arrested for allowing this, for our country to be invaded in these states. These bluer states are going to get bluer and bluer because all these illegals are going to vote Democrat for the free handouts for the next 100 years.
Yes.
So I hope everybody's listening, Mike. And Ukraine is one thing. And we're going to have a problem with Kim Jong-un in North Korea, too. That's coming next, Mike.
Yes.
I went down, this guy shoots an EMP off in the Midwest before it's all over. But this bumbling buffoon Biden, this guy is a Bolshevik and sheep's clothing. Mike, that's my opinion, Mike. Okay?
Okay.
I'll tell you, Kamala Harris, you know who Kamala Harris is married to. Look it up.
Yes.
Look who her husband was, what he endorses. Now, Mike, going back to this governor in Montana, this gentleman here finally must have been listening to your show or somebody. Because, Mike, you've been saying it all along for at least 3 years that I remember. Title VIII is a violation of our Constitution. You can be punished with severe penalty under law.
Yes.
And this under our constitutional declaration. Now, we are a free republic, Mike, but we've allowed these dirty Democrat leftist communists to sneak into our country and take it over through Hollywood and every other stinking avenue they could muster. Now, Joe McCarthy was 100% right, Mike, back in the 50s when he said our country is full of communism. Hollywood is full of communist Zionists, Bolshevik Marxism. Mike?
Yes.
Now, what's going on today with Ron DeSantis here in Florida, Mike, he's seconding the motion, and he already has it, but he's going to get stricter because Herald reported DeSantis can even be stricter than the governor of Montana, Mike. Did you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Now, also they're going after Congressman Matt Gaetz for supposedly being with a 17-year-old girl, which is a lie. They're going after all these Republicans. Even the rhinos are on board with these Democrats like Murkowski. These Democrats, rhinos are disgraceful, Mike. They're absolutely deplorable, what they have done to our country with these demon rat white trash. It's horrible. Now, we finally got a couple men who got some big balls saying we're not going to allow our Anglo-Caucasian culture to go away.
Okay.
We're not going to allow it, Mike. We are in the majority. We're not the minority. The asphalt's not going to tell the gasoline what to do no more. That's what we need to do in all these red states. If all these red state governors are smart, Mike, they would listen to your narrative that you are breaking law by allowing the Title VIII of the Constitution to be broken. We cannot allow that no more, Mike. Everywhere I go, I'm at Home Depot right now, Mike. I'm sitting in the parking lot talking to you. And I can tell you right now, there's 30 guys. It's raining. We had a big rainstorm. It's called Mike, your answerer. And we got 30 guys over there trying to jump in my truck. And when the pouring rain, they want to find jobs, Mike.
Yes.
But in the meantime, where are all these people staying in Section 8 homes, Mike? Tell me what's going on, please. What are these people doing? They're getting food stamps, they're getting welfare checks, and they're still trying to get jobs. Any kind of job they can. I don't blame them. But, Mike, we got Americans who can't find work.
Yes.
And you got all this competition.
Exactly.
Then you got this Ignacio Ocasio-Cortez. When you call her service, Mike, my name is Ignacio Ocasio-Cortez. Who is she? Now, Mike, if I were to say, my name is Paul Acton Liebach, if I were to say that, you think they would allow that, Mike? Our Congress is going to allow a bunch of people to call and say, well, I want to speak German. I don't want English. I don't want Spanish. I want German. I'm the majority. I am the majority in the United States. I want to speak German. Correct, Mike?
Who knows what the Congress would do in response to that? The fact is, the United States does not have an official language. It never has had, unlike Canada, which has two.
Well, our government does have official language. It's called English, Mike. Millions of men went to the battlefield. They didn't take German and they didn't take Spanish lessons. They didn't speak German. They didn't speak Spanish on the battlefield when they won these wars for our country. They spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I say. Our country is an English-speaking country. Our government's run in English. We don't need all this nonsense where, hey, we don't have, pretty soon, Mike, we have to speak Chinese. Now we got all these Chinese screaming out racism, how white man's racist. Why are they coming here then, Mike? Why are all these people coming here for white man so bad? Why? Why don't they stay in their own country to
free handouts? They're getting free handouts. They're getting free stuff, free medical care.
We're going to stop that free handout.
Yeah, we got to. We absolutely have to.
Free handouts.
All right. Well, Tom, I got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We've got more callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And welcome back to our show here. The phone lines, we have some lines open, area code 512-248-8252. And we're going to go to Andrea in Oklahoma. Andrea, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha. I have two things that's on my mind. If we go to war, there's a lot of parts that come from other countries.
Yes.
And if those countries cut us off, we'll just have to stop the war real quick, and we may be up to our necks in gators as we're crossing the stream, and not realize that we've ventured too far into something that we don't produce anymore.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the reasons why the United States was on the winning side in big mistake number one and big mistake number two is we were one of the world's premier manufacturing powerhouses, and we're not that anymore because it's all been offshored.
Yes, and the other thing that concerns me is I've been listening to your show since 2008. Mm-hmm. Whenever they were doing TARP. The thing is, when Fukushima came in and had the disaster happen, you indicated that General Electric has designed almost all the nuclear power plants.
Yes.
In that design, they have designed in flaws, and they're only supposed to last 13 years. So how many nuclear plants do we have that should be going offline and not be used anymore because their 13 years are up? And the other thing is, how are they storing those rods? Because Fukushima, I think, from what I can remember, was storing them up in the ceilings or something bizarre. It was
Yeah, they were just putting them up in the rafters there, and nobody's ever worked out a solution on how they're going to store that stuff. I mean, they were talking about a national disposal site in the Yucca Mountains that really has not worked out all that well. I remember, I think it was about 3-4 years ago when there were these massive floods in the middle of this country, where there was a nuclear power station that was storing their spent nuclear rods in these outdoor water-filled pools, and the concern was that the floodwaters could breach those pools, and you'd have this highly contaminated water flowing downstream from there. So it's been handled kind of recklessly.
I think it's time that America stop and keep our nose in our own business for a change.
Yes.
And just work on the problems that we have. Just the idea that the Pacific Ocean, if we were to even tackle the trash that's out there, and like you mentioned the other day, all these face masks are starting to be on little animals. They're, killing them because, well, as the article was saying yesterday, they've got asbestos in them, and here we are breathing that. I think that was horrible that China's sending over a product that has asbestos, and here we've got it stuck on our face.
Well, it's not asbestos, it's graphene, and whereas asbestos would be illegal in the United States of America, graphene is not. Doesn't mean it's not harmful, but if the law says it's okay to make, companies are going to make it because it's cheap and they make more money. As far as cleaning up the ocean, there are volunteer groups trying to do that, but it's really, just a drop in the ocean, quite literally. I mean, the United States is in terrible shape on several fronts. The nuclear power area is certainly one of them. Instead of building all these weapons and threatening the world with them, we should have been working on fusion power or thorium cycle reactors, which are far less toxic and far less dangerous. But again, it's whatever they can make the most money on.
Well, that was my comment, and I thank you for your comment because I'm stressed about it. But it's hard to hold the reins whenever I thought we had one president, and he might have tried to tackle it, but I know Biden's not going to even think about it. But thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for the call. We're going to go to Peter in Los Angeles. Hello, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just wanted to chime in on this Russia-Ukraine, Crimea situation, and there's a couple reasons. You hit on a couple, Mark hit on a couple. There's no such thing in our doctrine anymore as victory, and how would you define victory over Russia? And if you would define victory, they would define defeat, and they would launch. Same thing with us.
Yes. So
this goes on to the same thing that I've been talking about that has been ever since the end of World War II. Our military is not about a victory. It's about grinding up resources and prolonged 20-year war in Afghanistan, going on 20 years in Iraq. For what? There's no objective. Nobody's ever said there was an objective. How do you define victory and defeat? The victory is the contractors churning out to their contracts and the congressmen getting their campaign donations and the army and the military guys getting promoted.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And that's why we have these very expensive, not really usable weapon systems like the F-35, the Zumwalt destroyer, the Gerald R. Ford. I mean, they're all boondoggles. They're very expensive boondoggles. And, when it comes right down to it, if we do get into a shooting war with anybody, with any great power, it's going to be an embarrassment. I mean, we're definitely going to lose this next one.
Well, Mike, if you look at the Ukraine and how if the Ukraine had been neutral, which it was up until 2011 or something, right?
Yes.
Then Russia has a very defensible border.
Yes.
But even with the Ukraine split in half, you'll see that now that it's like a soft underbelly under Moscow for 600 miles is open.
Yes.
Right? And they can be outflanked and all that, and deep into the the very vitals of that country. And by the way, of the 26 or 28 million people who died in World War II, probably 15 million of them in Russia it is.
Yes.
Probably 15 million of them died in or for the Ukraine. And they're not going to let that go. That's absolutely their core interest. And by the way, the Marine Corps is getting rid of all their tanks. This is the step.
Yes.
This is the breadbasket of Europe. It's like Iowa, right? This is tanking. This is Kursk country.
Yes.
Stalingrad. By the way, also it would cut off the Volga. Would cut off Russian oil from the south. So this is not something they're doing, and we're going to fight them with an armor-poor army, which is ours. Yes. Very armor-poor, and a bunch of transgender soldiers waiting for their operations.
Yes.
I mean, it ain't going to work, Mike.
No, it isn't.
Army, it even was 10 years ago.
No, you're absolutely right. We're going to lose this one. I'm sorry, but we are.
Yeah. This is, and the only people who would win are as you pointed out, the contractors, the congressmen who will take the money from the contractors.
Right.
And that's it. That's really it. But
no, and if when the war goes against the United States, it'll just take their money and they'll bug out and go someplace where they think they can be safe for the rest of their lives.
Mike, another thing that I think I sent you the other day you were talking about the Chinese-Iranian cooperation.
Yes.
And also Turkey opened up a big Chinese plant.
Yes.
They announced the deal. Remember, I've spoken of it before, and we've talked about it. The Mackinder, the Scottish geopolitical strategist who came out with the Heartland theory in like 1900.
Yes.
Whoever controls the world island, which is the Eurasian landmass, and the Heartland is defined as China, Mongolia, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Turkey, controls the world, right? And that's the alliance that's emerging now. We're Turkey,
yes,
Russia,
yep,
Iran,
yep,
Pakistan, China,
yes,
with borders on the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean, the South China Sea, the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, the Arctic Ocean, and the Black Sea, and the Baltic. And can do all that with rail lines. And that's what's emerging right now, because for the last 50 years, we've been following a foreign policy that's not good for us. It's good for Israel. Whatever our foreign policy has been is not good for us. It's good for Israel. So, that has been our predominant foreign policy, where we focused our diplomatic and our military power. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Yemen. You know the list.
I know the list.
None of us. There's no good has come of this for the United States. It's taken out of a lot of Israel's enemies, but not ours. And now we're broke. Our military is almost broken, and we haven't advanced our own interests one iota.
No. It's all about the bankers and the defense contractors, and that's why Eisenhower called it the military-industrial complex. It was just a way of bleeding more money from the American people with the constant state of war.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and they don't care at all. And that goes back to to World War II. Anything post-World War has been all about that. And thankfully, Eisenhower, as a supreme commander in Europe and a 5-star general and a chief of staff of the Army, knew how to navigate and control these guys, but nobody since him has been able to do so.
No, they don't want to, because the military-industrial complex simply buys the government they want. That's why Tulsi Gabbard got zero traction when she was running for president last year. I mean, she's been in a combat zone herself. She knows what war is, and she's very much anti-war. And the instant she came out and said that, I said, "Oh, she's never going to get anywhere." Because the military-industrial complex will have their contacts in the press demonize her and smear her. And once again, by the time we actually get to the polling places, we have a pre-selected group of puppets for the military-industrial complex and the bankers to choose from. And especially with last November, that didn't even matter anyway because the election was stolen.
Well, Mike, one more thing, and you got to have callers, I'm sure, but the bankers, one thing, the bankers and the media, all owned by the same people. Let's be clear who they are. They're Israeli firsters, to be kind and say it that way.
Okay.
But there's two things that they will never allow in a presidential candidate or any candidate. And one is they will never allow the primacy of us fighting to the last American soldier for Israel, which when Tulsi Gabbard went to Syria and said that we should be treating with Assad, that was the end for her.
Yes, it was.
That was it for her. That was it. The other thing is anything at all that advances a white political identity. The bankers, the Jews, let's be frank, the Jews will absolutely put the kibosh on.
Yes.
And that's what happened to Trump. So, at any rate, that's my deal for the day, Mike. Thanks for giving me the time.
All right, you've got it, and we're going to switch over to John in Wisconsin. Hello, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
I'd like to talk about the gun problem we got now going on. And a foreigner comes in our country and shoots it up. And instead of punishing the people that do the crime, they want to punish the people that got shot or killed or the victims and take the guns away so more people can come in here and shoot us.
Yeah, I mean, this whole push for gun control, it's not about crime because criminals generally get their guns through non-legitimate sources, and I'm sure that along with all the drugs that are being smuggled into this country, there are probably a lot of these small disposable handguns, the Saturday night specials, that are being smuggled in as well. And the criminals will buy that, they'll commit a crime, and just toss the gun away so it can't be traced back to them.
That's right, yeah. And I'd like to say, too, that, if you own property, you only own that property if somebody somewhere with a gun says you own it. And if they get all your guns taken away from you, then they're going to consider you a barnyard animal, and we don't let barnyard animals have guns.
Well, we're being treated like barnyard animals anyway these days. We're being told what foods we must eat, what foods we can't eat, what drugs we must take, what drugs we're not allowed to take. We're being treated like livestock.
Right. A little mention on taxes. I talked to a guy one time, and I says, if you buy something for $10, I said, well, $99 of that $10 is taxes. And he says, no, it isn't. $9.50 is hidden taxes there.
You're close to it. It's about 2/3. When you buy a product off the shelf at the local supermarket, about 2/3 of that price is taxes applied. At the point of manufacture, at the point of shipping, at the point of reception, at the point of the warehouse. It was even worse in Hawaii, where we had this accumulating tax that basically was 15% on anything that we bought at the store. And they're going to come up with new taxes. I mean, Biden announced before he was even anointed that he was going to be raising taxes, and now they're talking about trillions of dollars of new taxes to go for this new Green New Deal that they're talking about.
All right, and there's another one here. when guy told me a long time ago that your rights end where the other guy's nose begins. And most people don't quite get that. People nowadays don't care where your nose is. They want to run over you.
Yeah, we're getting that from the liberals. Okay, John, I got to let you go. We got to take a commercial break. We've got callers for the last segment of our program, and we will be right back. Welcome back to our show here, the last segment of the program today. We're going to go back to the phones to David in San Francisco. Hello, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Oh, hey, Michael. Yeah, there were a couple of things. A woman that was talking about the Fukushima and the coolant ponds.
Yes.
She was right, and it was an amazing thing. If you looked at the photographs of that building, the rods, if I remember right, they're 18 feet long.
Yes.
They may be longer than that, but they're pretty darn long. So they have this swimming pool that is hanging off the top of the building to the side.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got to be water, 18, like imagine an 18-foot deep water a swimming pool hanging off the side of a building way up there.
Yes.
And what they do is they have a gripper that grabs the fuel rod and it drags it along a track, but it tries to keep it in the water, and then it dips it down into the reactor. And then they store the extra rods way up there in that swimming pool. And so it's when Fukushima happened, the building started leaning and cracking, and you had, if those things get exposed to air, they burst into flames.
Yes,
and
they
the
do.
Smoke comes, it's radioactive smoke.
Yes.
So, and it's Westinghouse and General Electric designed those. And the famous filmmaker Kurosawa,
Yes.
Japanese filmmaker, he made one of his last films was a 4-part film. It was 4 different stories in one film, and if I remember right, it's called Red Sky.
Yes.
And it's about the building of a nuclear power plant in a stupid zone.
Yes.
And if I remember right, in the 11th century, there was a massive tsunami that went so far inland that the people of Japan put up stone markers to show how far the tsunami had gotten in there.
Yes.
And when they were doing the planning for Fukushima, they refused to acknowledge those markers. And they said that's preposterous. There couldn't have possibly been a tidal wave that deep. And they went ahead and built Fukushima, but to make it worse, they had a 100-foot cliff where the reactors are now, and they basically leveled that cliff so they could put it closer down to the shore.
Yes, they did.
So if there was a tsunami that had gotten past a 100-foot cliff to go that deep in there, that was just amazing that they were, it's stupidity and willfulness beyond measure.
It really is, and all of the Japanese nuclear plants along that part of the coast suffered damage except for one, I believe is Kanagawa, because the manager who supervised its construction insisted on much higher protection for tidal waves, and unfortunately he passed away before the earthquake and tsunami happened, so he couldn't enjoy his vindication. But that one that he built was the only Japanese nuclear reactor that did not suffer any damage.
Sure.
Oh, and there's the music.
I hear the music, but the last thing is they found counterfeit parts in almost every one of the nuclear power plants, and they shut them all down and went solar, and they're solar today.
Well, it's a big problem. Anyway, I need to let you go, and it's the end of our program. I apologize to those callers that are still on hold. Please try and call in early tomorrow, and we'll pick you up at that point. Stay tuned for John Stedmiller's show, and Steve Elkins is going to be sharing the microphone there as well. Spread the word of RBN. Spread the word of whatreallyhappened.com. Please donate. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.